Hello again and welcome to Lesson 2 of Module 2. In the last lesson, we really did a lot of groundwork. Essentially, you used most of the tools I use when I draw. How are you going with the keyboard shortcuts? Are you finding them useful? As you can see, for me, they are a necessary part of my process, and the more I use the program, the more automatic my use of them becomes. Make sure you have a printout of my shortcuts next to you at all times, that is, until you become more familiar with them. Does a shoe construction analogy help you understand the way we create full closed shapes in Illustrator? In this lesson, I will introduce you to a couple of my favorite things. One will be the Swatches panel libraries, and the other will be my all-time favorite, the Brushes panel, where we will create our own library of brushes. Before we do the color and brushes, we will give our very flat, almost one-dimensional shoe a little bit of a tweak to make it look more three-dimensional. So, in front of us we have our multicolored sandal. Why have I done the shoe in so many awful colors to start with? I do this to help me make sure all my pieces are separate and closed shapes. I find this also helps when I explain this to you. But let's first make it a little more stylish and change all the colors to one color. I will use a color for the outside and another for the lining. Here, I'm going to introduce you to some of the Swatches panel options. I'll drag this out from the other docked panels and keep it open while I work with it. First, I'll do a quick overview of this panel and the options we will use mainly. You can click onto the hyperlink in the transcript for more details if you wish. The Swatches panel consists of a few kinds of swatches. Here, they are listed under the Show Swatch Kinds drop-down menu. We will be working with all options at different stages of the course. You can display swatches in the way that suits you best, from small thumbnail view, as I have here to save space, through to large thumbnail and list views, displaying the swatch kind and name. Here I will also give you a brief overview of color models and output. There are two main color models we use for two different outputs. One is CMYK and the other is RGB. CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow and black. This is used when printing work on paper. Colors are made up of a combination of percentages of the four colors, with white being the absence of color, or the paper color. Each of the colors are laid down in dots of cyan, magenta, etc. Our eye combines them to produce a color. This is very evident when you look closely at a large digitally printed poster. The quality and clarity of a print depends on how fine the dots are. RGB, red, green and blue. This color model will be used when creating work which will be viewed digitally only. Once again, the colors are made up of a combination of dots in these colors. All digital screens display color by using light. The light is white, and red, green and blue are overlaid to produce the colors. Here, black is the absence of color. I am working in RGB as I am communicating digitally. I always start all my files in RGB and save them to PDF for print if I am printing the file. But more on this later. For the curious, there is a lot more to know about color for print and display purposes. You can click on the link in the transcript to find out more. There are a ton of YouTubes on this too. But don't lose yourself in these. We've got a job to get on with here. Right, so that being said, let's choose a color group for this shoe. I'll go to the drop-down menu here on the right of the panel and open Swatch Library and then Earth Tones. This opens up a separate panel and I can select the colors I want. I'll choose the last color group, Earth Tone 10. When I select the folder, it loads this into my Swatches panel, and I can close this color library now. I'll just redock my swatches. Do you remember that we have grouped each of the shoe drawings in different groups of components? I'll start with the side view. When I ungroup this, I have all the pieces above the sole grouped. When I ungroup these, the outside and the inside are grouped separately. I'll make the outside view this color, and the inside view, the lining, a lighter color, similar to the skin color we use for lining. For the sole and heel, I'll use my group selection tool to pick up the pieces from within the group. This is the white arrow with the addition symbol next to it. So, I click onto the heel, hold the Shift key down at the same time, and select the slight platform as well, and change the color to the color I used for the outside. I'll make the inside sole the lining color. Let me do the same with the top view now. The next part of the process is to add a little more dimension to the views. Looking at the side view, I'll just ungroup everything above the sole. Now, I'll copy the quarter to the back and arrange and send it behind the sole. And I will line it up with the inside view. I realize this is subtle, but you do get the picture, I am sure. I'll just copy and adjust the toe panel and the other crossover strap. Don't group everything just yet, as we need to add the stitch lines still. I'll do the top view now. I'll first adjust the crossover straps where they intersect with the toe panel and add a little more dimension here. Can you see the difference? I'm also going to adjust the toe panel a little more, and then I'll copy this shape and move it all the way to the back. I'll straighten that a little. It will be easier to view this without the template now. The next thing I'll do is add the lines that I'll apply the stitch brushstroke to. Here you will see why I asked you not to group the components just yet. Let's just take one panel and offset the path. I'll do the quarter again. I've got this selected and I'll go to the Object drop-down menu, Path, and Offset Path. A dialog box will come up here and I can choose my values. I'll do -0.75 millimeters, and I'll check Preview to see how this looks, and then OK. I've put the subtraction symbol in because I want the path to be offset on the inside of the panel. This creates a copy of the whole shape, fill and stroke within our original panel. I'll have to do this for each of the panels to preserve the layer order. That is, so I don't have stitching for one piece sitting on top of another piece. This would waste time with trimming. This is an operation I do very often when drawing in Illustrator, so I would prefer to have a shortcut for this. As you can see, there is no shortcut for this operation, but we can add one if we wish. I'll show you how this is done. Go to the Edit drop-down menu, Keyboard Shortcuts, and a dialog box will open. Here, I'll select the Menu Commands option, then Object, path, offset path, and here I can add in my new command. I'll use Shift Command O for offset path, and OK. And yes, I do want to overwrite this. I can now pick up each piece and offset path with a new shortcut, Shift Command or Control O. I'll select all these lines and remove the fill, change the color and make the stroke weight 1.2 points. I'll adjust the lines as they will appear on a sewn shoe, so I won't have stitching in some places. I'll do the top view now. I will also offset the path of the sole in the top view. I'll use our new shortcut again, Shift Command or Control O, but this time I'll make the offset 1 mm and preview it. OK. This adds another sole behind my original. Do you see how this one goes on the outside of the original sole? This is because I don't have the subtraction in front of the value now. I'll adjust this to suit my drawing. Now, let's get to my all-time favorite, the brushes panel. For this lesson, I will only demonstrate two simple pattern brush options. The first will be the one needle brush. There is an option to just use a dashed line in the stroke panel, but I think this appears a little sterile, so I prefer to create my own brush. This will be another asset for you to build, just like the symbol library we created in Module 1. I always create my brushes very close to the scale they will appear in the drawing. For this size drawing, it will be around 1 to 3 millimeters. I'll zoom right in and draw a line with the Line Segment tool. Selecting the tool, I'll click once onto the surface and a dialog box will appear. In the dialog box, I can specify the length, 1 millimeter, and the angle of the line, 0 degrees. I don't fill the line, as this causes problems down the track with the brush. Make sure you have a stroke on this line before you deselect it. Select one of the deeper greys, as this will have some significance when we create the brush stroke. I'll just curve this line a little on the one side and make the stroke 1.5 points with a round cap. I'll copy this to the front and make this stroke 1 point and nudge it up a little. I'll use my black arrow as selection tool for this. I'll select a lighter grey for this line. Now I will turn this into a pattern brush and explain why I have used 2 greys when colouring this. First, I select the 2 lines I have just drawn, open the brushes panel and click onto the new brush button at the bottom of this panel. Or you can go to the drop-down menu on the side and select New Brush if you prefer that. A new dialog box will open and I will select Pattern Brush. Once the Pattern Brush option box comes up, you will see that the brush you have just created appears in the second tile from the left. Let's first name this brush 1 needle top stitch. I'll leave the scale as fixed and the spacing at 0%. Now I'll talk you through the 5 tiles in the pattern brush. For this brush, we will only use 3. Just a quick note here. Automatic corner tile options are not available in older versions of Illustrator. That is, if you have CS6 or lower. Please ask me in the comments if you would like some direction on creating these. So, to create this brush, you will see your original artwork in the second tile. This is the side tile. In the first tile, you can click on the drop-down arrow to reveal the corner options. For most things I do, I find that the auto-centered option works best. I will do this for the third tile too, the inner corner. For this brush, we don't need a start and end tile. At this point, I do not select any of the flip options. In Fit, I select Stretch to Fit. Now for the important part, colorization. Here in Method, I'll select Hue Shift. The best way for you to see the difference is to try each of these yourself. Once that is done, select OK to save the new brush in the panel. I'll draw a rectangle so you can see this brush in action. I'll need to zoom out a little. Can you see when I have black in the stroke option, the whole brush is black, and there are no tones? Let me just change this to mustard. Now can you see the brush is a hue of the stroke color? Check this by putting a square with a mustard fill behind the rectangle. I'll go to the brushes panel and illustrate what the other colorization methods do here. I have the rectangle with my new stitch brushes in it still selected. I'll double-click on the brush panel to bring up the options. I've checked Preview so I can see how the different colorization options affect the color of the brush. None of these are the only way you can do this. All are correct at various times and depending on the application. Further on, we will talk about options of selected object. Now I will apply this brush to my drawing. Do you remember that I changed my stroke weight and color of my offset paths? I did this to demonstrate another time-saving process to you. In my need for speed, I've explored a lot. Here I'll select one of my lines and go to the Select drop-down menu and same, now stroke color or stroke weight. As you can see, this selects all strokes that conform to the credentials of the line I first selected. Now I'll apply my 1 needle brush and change the stroke color to the color I want. I've selected the color of the outer shoe, And I'll double-click the stroke option on the Tools panel to bring up the color picker and tweak the color a little here. Can you see how the brush I've just created has a little bit of dimension with a darker side to it? Well, to be correct, I'd like all lines to have the shadow on the same side. So I'll select each line I want to change the flip option of. Go to my brushes panel and click onto the Options of Selected Object button to open a dialog box. Here I'll check the flip across or flip along option, depending on the direction I'd like the brush to flip. The arrows are a good clue here, and of course you'll have Preview selected too. So I've done it. I've added the stitch lines to my shoe. As you can see, these add a little more dimension to the drawing. I'll add these to the top view now. I won't do this here, but it is also fine to add stitching to the lining or the inside of the shoe using the same instructions as before. I'm going to demonstrate the decorative zigzag edge, or the paint edge, now. Here I will bring in some concepts with creating repeat patterns. The paint edge is a decorative finish to the components. Our shoe is fully lined, so you will see the stitched line as well. If the crossover straps were not lined, naturally there'd be no stitching next to the paint edge. I'll copy the lines I want to add the decorative edge to. So, select the line and anchor points with the Direct Selection tool, the right arrow, and copy and paste this to the front. Change the stroke weight to 0.5 and make it red to differentiate it from the other lines. Remember, we'll use the Select Zone option here too. Now to do the brush, I'll start by creating a square. I select my rectangle tool, click onto the work area and drag, pressing the Shift key at the same time to create the square. I'll rotate this 45 degrees. You can do this by holding the Shift again and rotating at the same time, and I'll immediately delete the bottom anchor point. Now I can reset the bounding box. To do this, I right-click, Transform and Reset Bounding Box, or if you want, you can go to the Object drop-down menu, Transform and Reset Bounding Box here. I do this because I would like to change the width and height of the triangle, and that will conform to the bounding box. I can change these in the Transform panel on the right here. W, 2 mm, and H, height, 1.5 mm. Now I'll change my keyboard increments to 1 mm and copy this triangle 2 more times using the Alt key and horizontal direction arrows. I now need to work out the repeat of the brush. If I use these shapes as is, the repeat would look incorrect. I'll show you quickly. I'll correct this repeat now. I know the width of my triangle is 2 mm. I made my keyboard increment 1 mm and copied this shape. So my full repeat is horizontal. As you saw in the first repeat, there were groups of 3 triangles. I need to crop this to have half a triangle on each side. I'll draw a rectangle 2 mm by 2 mm and line this up with the apex of the outside triangles. I'll make this rectangle transparent and select everything. Now I'll crop this using the Pathfinder panel crop option. We can effectively make this brush right now. Have a look. Again, just a little fine-tuning will save you a lot of time later. To do this, I'll create another rectangle 2 mm wide and 3 mm high with a fill in it. I'll place this over the pinked edge brush and line it up with a repeat and send it to the back. I'll then line the center of the rectangle up with the bottom edge of the brush and make it transparent, no fill and no stroke. I'll create the brush again, and this time I'll name this brush Pinked Edge Brush. No scaling, no spacing, and no flip. Now, for this brush, I'll make the colorization tints. Can you see the difference now? The brush is continuous, and the edge of the brush is lined up with the stroke. This works well in most cases. Let's apply this to the edge of the crossover straps and the toe panel now. You will see that the brush is now the color of the line we have just created. From here, I'll save both my swatches library and my brushes library. I'll save them with only what we want to keep. In the swatches panel, I can delete everything except the swatches I have used. I would also like to keep the grey color group, our earth tone 10 colors, and the top row of default colors, as well as some gradients. In the brushes panel, delete any of the practice brushes you have done and only keep the final correct pattern brushes. Keep the other brushes too. To save these panels, we will do the same as we did with the symbols. Go to the drop-down menu in the panel and save brush or swatch library. You will be directed to the brushes and swatch library respectively. Save these. To access them again, you can open the drop-down menu and go to User Defined. In this module, you have learned some fundamental tools for drawing shoes in Illustrator. Our shoe is taking shape and starting to look a little bit more animated as we add details. We are starting to build up our assets and familiarize ourselves with the nuts and bolts of drawing and Illustrator. Again, please practice some of your own brushes. Perhaps you can create a 2-needle brush. Maybe try some broguing. In the next module, we will look at different and more complex brush types and creating brush trims like jewels and studs. As I always say, I am here and happy to answer questions and to help. Remember, if you are using an older version of AI and need some help with finding tools and processes, please don't hesitate to ask me. I look forward to catching up with you in Module 3.